My name is Ronald Bishop. I'm 58 years old, and I spent nearly half my life working for a freight and logistics company called Skybridge Freight, headquartered in Houston, Texas. I started back in 1995 as a ground delivery coordinator. When I left, or rather, when they pushed me out, I was Senior Vice President of Contract and Logistics Strategy. Over the years, I faced every kind of crisis. I knew every route, every fuel hub, every major client. If a truck carrying platinum components broke down somewhere in Mississippi at 3 a.m., I'd be the one on the phone rerouting delivery through Louisiana so we wouldn't miss a deadline. Clients knew, if Ron Bishop was running the project, it would be done right. Every time. My wife, Carol, understood what I sacrificed for that job. I miss family barbecues, Christmases, birthdays. She used to say, "You're going to burn out. These people are just using you." And I'd answer, "This is who I am, Carol. It's just how I'm built." When I turned 57, the company brought in a new CEO. A polished guy from California, an MBA with bright eyes and buzzwords. He kept saying, "We need fresh energy. A younger team." 2 months after I signed the biggest deal in company history, $1.3 billion for aviation components bound for Perth, Australia, he called me into his office. He said, "We really respect you, Ron, but your methods are a bit dated. We want to transition you to an advisory role at 55% of your current pay. You'll mentor the new talent, share your experience." I replied, "You want me fetching coffee for kids who can't even read a logistics map? After 28 years? He couldn't meet my eyes. I signed the paperwork. That evening, I didn't go home. I drove out to an old abandoned lot outside the city, parked my truck, and just sat there. If I wasn't needed in the one place I gave my life to, then who the hell was I? But this isn't a story about defeat. It's a story about what I did next. Because every complex system, especially one like ours, relies on fragile connections. And I knew where every nerve was. I quietly removed a single file from the system. A voice authentication key linked to the contract distribution network. Without it, no new orders could be processed. Not even under active agreements. A week later, I got the call. He said, "Ron, do you have any idea why the system's throwing error 241B? We've got Boeing on the line, they can't access the portal." I answered, "Must be a glitch. Maybe tell your new guy to reboot. Or bring coffee. Whatever it is he does now." And that's when it all started. Dozens of contracts frozen. Stock dropped. Clients started asking, "Where's Ron Bishop?" And me? I was sitting in a bar in Austin, sipping bourbon, watching traffic roll past. 2 weeks later, the client from that billion-dollar deal called. He said, "If you're no longer at Skybridge, maybe you'd like to work with us directly?" It wasn't a collapse. It was a rebirth. My wife left a month later, once she realized she couldn't handle life with a man who no longer worked 14-hour days under someone else's thumb. But I held no grudge. I rebuilt from scratch. No more boardrooms. No more status meetings. Just clear contracts, clean decisions, and a signature people finally learned to respect. But what I didn't realize back then, as I sat alone in that bar, thinking I had nothing left to lose, was that the real storm hadn't even started yet. 2 weeks into my so-called retirement, I noticed a black sedan parked near my building. Every morning. Every night. Same car. Same spot. I wasn't paranoid, just observant. Years in logistics sharpened that instinct. Then one evening, as I walked back from the grocery store, a man stepped out. Early 40s. Gray suit. Clean-shaven. Government type. He said, "Mr. Bishop, can we talk?" I invited him upstairs. He introduced himself as Matthew Quinn from the Department of Commerce. Said he was investigating Skybridge Freight under a federal compliance audit. He said, "We believe certain digital protocols were intentionally compromised after a leadership transition. Several billion-dollar transactions are in limbo. Boeing, Lockheed, international partners. The ripple effect is growing. I said nothing. Just listened. He continued, "You're not the target, Mr. Bishop. But you might hold the key to stopping a disaster." I could tell he meant it. And I also knew, if I gave them what they wanted, Skybridge would recover. The same company that chewed me up and tossed me aside. But then Quinn dropped the real bombshell. He said, "Your name's been flagged in correspondence. Someone inside still sees you as a threat. Or an asset. Depends who you ask." That night, I sat by the window long after the streetlights came on. I wasn't worried about Quinn. I was thinking about the company lawyer I once mentored, the HR director who once asked me for help moving into her first home, and the new CEO who thought he was untouchable. They were all still inside Skybridge. And someone in there was still afraid of what I might do next. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. You think losing your job is the worst thing that can happen. Just wait until the man you underestimated starts making calls. The first call I made was to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Jordan Meeks, former cybersecurity lead at a defense contractor in Denver. Fired after whistleblowing on internal espionage. Brilliant. Paranoid. Exactly what I needed. He answered on the second ring. I said, "Jordan, it's Ron Bishop. You still owe me a favor." He said, "That was 20 years ago." I said, "So is the dirt I have on you. We're square. I need your eyes on Skybridge. Off the grid. No noise." He didn't ask why. He never did. Over the next 5 days, Jordan set up a network of passive listeners around Skybridge's digital infrastructure. Not to hack, just to observe. And what we found wasn't just incompetence. It was manipulation. Data rerouted. Documents altered. Bonuses approved post factum. Someone was preparing for a cover-up. At the center of it all? Lucas Brennan. The new CEO. He wasn't just refreshing the company. He was bleeding it slowly. Shifting contracts to shell firms. Pulling cash through third-party logistics fronts registered in Nevada, Florida, and suspiciously, Malta. I called Matthew Quinn. I said, "Still think I'm just a guy with a grudge? I've got evidence now. And I'm not handing it over to some desk agent. I want a meeting with the U.S. Attorney." He agreed. I flew to D.C. on a Wednesday. A quiet briefing. Confidential. No records. They listened. Took notes. And then they asked the question I was waiting for. "Are you willing to help bring them down?" I looked them in the eye and said, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to make things right. But I want one thing in return." "Name it," they said. I said, "When it's over, I want to walk into that building, look Lucas Brennan in the eyes, and fire him myself." They didn't blink. And so it began. The first move was subtle. A forensic audit launched under the guise of a routine Department of Labor compliance check. It rattled middle management but didn't alert Lucas, not yet. Jordan kept digging. We found emails between Brennan and a private equity group in Tampa. They were prepping for a hostile buyout, using inflated losses to drive down Skybridge's value. Brennan would sell at a loss, then rejoin post-acquisition with a golden parachute. Classic corporate cannibalism. Meanwhile, my contact at Lockheed forwarded me an internal memo. Delays in Skybridge delivery schedules were raising red flags. Their procurement team was on edge. I knew timing was everything. Push too hard, too soon, and Brennan would cut bait and disappear. So I baited the hook. I leaked a redacted report to a journalist at the Houston Chronicle. Nothing explosive. Just enough to raise eyebrows. The headline 2 days later. "Leadership shuffle at Skybridge. Normal transition or hidden trouble?" Brennan scrambled. Ordered an internal review. That review pointed fingers. People panicked. HR fired 2 junior staffers. A smokescreen. But the real explosion came when Jordan cracked a shadow email account Brennan used for off-the-book negotiations. Among the usual garbage and ego-stroking correspondence, we found a contract draft. Not just a sale agreement. A transfer of proprietary military-grade software schematics to a logistics firm with ties to a foreign consortium. That crossed the line. I called Quinn. You need to move now. This isn't about money anymore. 2 days later, the Department of Justice opened a sealed investigation. Grand jury. Subpoenas. Quiet but lethal. But even as the net tightened, I couldn't sleep. Because tucked between Jordan's files, there was something else. An email from my ex-wife, Carol. Dated 3 weeks earlier. Sent to Brennan's personal address. She said, "He's still bitter. Watch your back. He won't stop." That hit harder than I care to admit. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I hadn't let myself consider. Someone I once loved had joined the other side. And if betrayal was now personal, I had to be ready for whatever came next. The morning after I read Carol's email, I drove out to Galveston. The ocean calms me. It always has. I sat on the hood of my truck, looking out at the Gulf, and tried to remind myself of one thing: this was never about her. It was about integrity. But you know what? That line only works in theory. When someone you built a life with chooses your enemy, it shakes something loose. Something that doesn't settle easily. I drove back that night different. Not angry. Not broken. Just colder. Sharper. Jordan messaged me around 2 a.m. He said, "Ron, I found something." He'd broken into Brennan's encrypted vault. It was protected by biometric data. But Brennan had once used a voice unlock protocol, a relic I designed. Jordan mimicked it using an old voicemail I had from back when Brennan still respected me. What he uncovered was a roadmap. Not metaphorically. Literally. An entire migration plan to move Skybridge's core assets offshore. Not to protect the company. To shield Brennan. Tax havens, paper directors, phantom freight chains. Everything. And worse, client data. Sensitive shipping schedules for defense contractors. Timetables. Routing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I printed everything. 3 copies. 1 locked in a safety deposit box in San Antonio. 1 mailed to Quinn. And one I kept under my mattress. Because trust, at this stage, was a luxury. 3 days later, I got a knock at the door. Not Quinn. Not Jordan. 2 men. Suits. One flashed a badge. "Mr. Bishop, we're with Homeland Security. We need you to come with us." I didn't ask why. I didn't resist. At their downtown Houston office, they laid it out. Someone had tipped them that I was in possession of classified routing schedules. A violation of national defense codes. I laughed. Not out of humor. Out of disbelief. I said, "So Brennan tries to bleed the company dry, and I'm the one on a watch list?" They didn't laugh. The room was cold. Interrogation room cold. I gave them the files. All of them. Every document, every line of code Jordan decrypted. I said, "I'm not your enemy. But if you don't act now, you're going to have a much bigger problem than an old man with a memory stick." They released me after 4 hours. No charges. But the warning was clear. I was now under surveillance. Back home, I sat alone in my apartment. Not a single light on. Just me and the hum of a fridge. Then came the call. Unknown number. I answered. Silence at first. Then a voice. Distorted. He said, "You should have taken the advisory role, Ron. You were safer behind a desk." I said, "Tell Brennan I'm not the one looking over my shoulder." "He is." The line went dead. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was real. That night I moved out. Took nothing but clothes, my laptop, and a burner phone. No cards. No IDs. Just cash. Because when the people who play chess with billion-dollar pieces decide you're a threat, you don't wait for the board to flip. And you sure as hell don't sleep in the same bed twice. When you disappear in America, you learn quickly who survives on the grid, and who knows how to live without it. I spent my first 3 nights in an RV park outside Abilene. Cash only. No names. Retired truckers and folks with stories they didn't want to tell. The kind of people who don't ask questions. Every morning, I shaved with cold water and watched the sunrise through a dusty plastic window. No news. No phone calls. Just silence. Jordan kept in touch through a secure chat we built back in the early 2000s. We called it Sand Trap. Encrypted. Disguised as a phishing forum. He said, "Things are moving. DOJ froze 2 Skybridge accounts. Brennan's lawyers are panicking. But he's not running. Yet." I said, "He won't. He still thinks this is a skirmish." Meanwhile, Quinn confirmed what I feared. I was on an internal watch list. Not public. But real. They hadn't charged me, but I wasn't free. I switched towns every 5 days. Waco. Amarillo. Lubbock. Motels where they gave you a key card and never looked twice. Then, in El Paso, it happened. I walked out of a diner just off I-10 and felt the air shift. 2 cars. One in front, one behind. Not police. Too quiet. I ducked into a Dollar Tree, out the back, into a drainage ditch. 20 minutes later, I was on a bus heading east. That night, I called Jordan from a burner. I said, "I need insurance. Not digital. Physical. Something I can use if they take me." 3 days later, he met me in a truck stop outside Las Cruces. Wore a baseball cap. Looked thinner. Older. He handed me a small black case. Inside, a USB stick, an old flip phone, and a handwritten note. He said, "That drive has 2 hours of audio. Brennan. The equity guys. A conversation they thought was private. And this phone? It pings every news desk in DC if you press 4, then 9. I said, "What's the note?" He said, "Names. Safe places. In case I disappear." I nodded. Took the bag. We didn't shake hands. He just walked away. 2 days later, the story broke. Not the whole story. Just a sliver. A leaked financial audit. Shell companies. Tax fraud. The New York Times ran it as an anonymous whistleblower report. But Brennan knew. He knew it was me. That night, I got another call. Same voice. Less distortion. He said, "You want to go to war, Bishop? Fine. But war means casualties." I said, "Then you better pray you're not the first." Click. Next morning, I found my truck torched in a motel parking lot. No casualties. Just smoke. Just a message. They were escalating. But so was I. Because the next time I called Quinn, I didn't ask for updates. I said, "I want a list of every contractor Skybridge ever used overseas. Especially in Malta. And I want a passport. Clean. New name." He said, "Are you running?" I said, "I'm hunting." And when the hunter doesn't fear the dark anymore, he becomes something else entirely. Malta isn't as far as it feels when you're chasing ghosts. The fake passport named me Richard Blake. I was 62, recently retired from an American consulting firm, visiting Europe for family reasons. The papers were clean. The identity built over 5 years by someone who clearly owed Quinn more than one favor. My flight landed in Valletta just after midnight. I didn't check luggage. Just the black case Jordan gave me, now duct taped to the inside of a duffel. Malta was beautiful. The kind of place where people disappear because they want to, not because they're forced. But I wasn't there for the views. I spent the first 2 days walking the city. Watching. Learning. Skybridge's foreign partners were headquartered in a sandstone building just off Trick Isle Mercanti. Harmless from the outside. But the names on the tenant list matched the LLCs Jordan had tracked: Seaward Transit, North Junction Maritime, Lyra Global. All empty shells. All conduits for something bigger. I made contact with a journalist from a French outlet working on international freight fraud. We met in a crowded cafe near the harbor. He didn't trust me at first. I slid him a folder with transcripts and routing slips. he said. Where did you get this? I said. Where I used to work. Before I saw what it was becoming. He promised to run it through his network. Said he knew people in Brussels, The Hague. He wasn't just writing stories, he was feeding prosecutors. The next day, I followed a man named Leandro Batista, Brennan's off-the-books coordinator. Portuguese. Former banker. Now laundering routes and invoices through customs loopholes. I watched him make 2 calls from a bench near St. John's Co-Cathedral. One in English, one in Mandarin. Both about transfers. Both using Skybridge codes I recognized. He wasn't just moving money. He was selling access. I took pictures. Logged locations. Forwarded everything to Quinn. His reply came back 3 hours later. You're not the only one watching him. I asked. Feds? He replied. Worse. Third-party interests. Private security. Looks like Brennan hired help. That night I didn't sleep. I shifted hotels. Burned the fake passport. Changed SIM cards. I was deep now. Deeper than I ever planned. The next morning, I found a note slid under my door. Typed. No name. It read, Nice try. But you're too late. Attached was a plane ticket, one way, back to Houston. Someone was calling me home. But I wasn't running. I called Quinn. I said, If they know I'm here, that means we flushed them out. It's time. He said, You sure? I said, They want to scare me. Let's show them what scared men can do when they stop playing by the rules. Then I called the journalist. I said, Release everything. Names, dates, the Malta connections. Do it now. He asked, What happens to you? I said, That depends. On how fast Brennan realizes he's out of places to hide. And on whether I make it out of this country alive. I landed in Houston under a name I wasn't born with. No one met me. I didn't expect a parade. I expected surveillance, and I wasn't disappointed. The same black sedan from weeks ago was parked half a block from the terminal. I rented a car from a lot in Katy. Paid cash. Drove west. No GPS. No phone. Just printed maps and a memory sharpened by fear and fury. For 2 days I stayed out of sight, but I wasn't hiding. I was watching. Lucas Brennan was still in Houston. According to Quinn, he hadn't left his condo in days. His legal team was unraveling. Offshore accounts frozen. One partner indicted. He was circling the drain. And I was holding the plunger. I still had the final USB. The audio. Verified. Timestamped. Legally admissible. It would make boardrooms go silent. Before I delivered it, Carol showed up. Same perfume. Same hard eyes. But something about her was already gone. She said, They'll destroy you. I said, They should have tried when I was tired. I'm not tired anymore. She stepped inside. She said, You abandoned me. I said, No. You warned Brennan. Then you slept with him. Silence. I handed her divorce papers. Signed. Filed. Done. She left without a word. I drove straight to the U.S. Attorney's office and handed over everything. The next morning, Brennan was arrested. No press release. No camera crew. Just steel cuffs and cold justice. Skybridge collapsed 6 months later. Brennan awaits trial. Carol filed for bankruptcy. I sent her a check. No note. Just a number. I'm not petty. Just finished. I consult now. Quiet. Private. For those who've heard the story and want to avoid becoming it. People think revenge is fire. It's not. It's a ledger. Balanced. Precise. And some debts, they must be paid in full. But just when I thought the final chapter had closed, there was a knock at my door. A young federal agent. He said, Mr. Bishop, there's something you need to see. It's about Jordan Meeks. I said, What about him? He handed me a flash drive. He said, Jordan wasn't just helping. He was selling. You weren't chasing one traitor. You were working with another. I closed the door. Sat in the dark. Sometimes, when you stare into the fire too long, you don't notice the one beside you holding the gas can. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, about real men who don't shout. They act. Cold. All the way.